In 2014, Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers released Godzilla, the film that really brought Godzilla back from a long 10-year hiatus. Shortly afterwards, Toho followed with Shin Godzilla, their own domestic Japanese release, and then of course a Godzilla anime trilogy. And now finally in 2019, we've come around to the sequel to Godzilla 2014 and the next film in the ever-growing Monsterverse. Now the question is, how does this film follow up the original 2014 film, and how does it continue to expand the Monsterverse and also eventually lead up to Godzilla vs. Kong? All these questions and more as we'll look at Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. Spoilers in this review.
Ancient species owned this earth long before mankind, and if we keep our heads buried in the sand, they will take it back.
Well, this film isn't perfect, and there are definitely some things I have to criticize, starting with the story. They tried to shake up the typical formula for a monster movie, I think, but it does kind of fall flat. We have this kind of convoluted plot about an eco-terrorist group and a lead scientist from Monarch teaming up to release the Titans from around the world. It generally feels like the writers were trying a little too hard to find a way to get all these monsters to fight each other. There's this machine called the Orca that kind of uses vocal patterns from monsters to kind of control them or communicate with them, but it ends up just becoming a plot device, literally, to get the monsters together to fight each other. And I feel like, funny enough, the older Toho films like Destroy All Monsters or Godzilla vs. Monster Zero had simpler plots where it was just aliens controlled the monsters and then they found a way to break them out of their control. Whereas this film feels like it was trying too many things and definitely felt kind of messy. The plot of this film is probably one of the weakest parts of it. It doesn't really do anything groundbreaking, and it just attempts to make everything more complicated for the sake of making it more interesting. Honestly, they should have not tried so hard on the plot. I think they should have just said the monsters break out and they fight each other. And that would have been more simple and more entertaining. Simple is sometimes better. Now, there were many characters in this film, of course. It's got kind of a big ensemble cast, plus you've got the monster characters as well. Kyle Chandler comes into play Mark Russell, kind of the father character of the film. And of course, he also ends up kind of becoming our de facto leader, who's kind of trying to save the day. He's definitely a typical dad character, right? He's doing all this because he wants to get back to his family, wants to get back to his daughter. And also he has this ongoing grudge against Godzilla because of what happened, you know, before the film began. But it just kind of comes off as very typical character who hates the monster because the monster killed the parents. We've seen this character trope countless times. Haru from the Godzilla anime trilogy, that one dude from Attack on Titan, where the character was parents or son or kids or uncle or whatever dog was killed by a monster and now they hate that monster. It's super typical, super cliche. So it made me care very little when he finally forgave Godzilla. I was like, okay, whatever. So the actress Vera Farmiga plays the character of Emma Russell, the estranged wife of Mark Russell and the mother of Millie Bobby Brown's character. She plays a monarch scientist who joins up with this eco-terrorist group to unleash the Titans, thinking that this will help bring balance to the earth, help kind of fix the problems of climate change and pollution and all the other horrible things humans have done to the world. And she thinks that this is the natural way to undo what humanity has done. And she definitely talks about balance and concepts like bringing balance to the earth and everything. And she has good intentions. She wants to make the world better. She wants to save it, she says. But, you know, good intentions, but she does horrible things. And I would almost call her the Thanos of this film because, like, you know, this character who has good intentions but commits horrible deeds because they think it's the only way to solve these problems. Another issue I kind of had, though, with her was the big reveal that she was the bad guy was kind of like, you could see it coming a mile away. For me, it was very obvious that she was the antagonist. They were kind of setting it up since like the beginning of the film. Something was kind of weird about her. It was kind of strange the way it was going. But honestly, I felt like her motivations for all of this, for her, she lost her son. And while I'm not trying to downplay that, we didn't get to know or learn anything really much about her son. And so her motivation just kind of felt not there. Like I didn't really understand really her full reasoning for this. So the whole movie, you're just kind of going, why are you doing this? Madison Russell, played by Millie Bobby Brown, kind of the star of the show, really is the child of the Russells. She kind of gets, not kidnapped by her mom, but pretty much dragged along. But definitely not an annoying child character. There's definitely been a long history of annoying child characters in monster movies, but she definitely didn't come across as that. She's pretty smart, she can take care of herself, but I think she does manage to do some things that were pretty crazy for a kid to be able to pull off, like escaping from an eco-terrorist military facility without being spotted, and then getting the radio set up in a stadium, and then surviving when King Ghidorah blasts like through the windows with full lightning. She kind of did some impossible things, and I think that kind of made her character a little bit unrealistic in that sense. But I didn't find her annoying, and I'm not sure how generally people thought about her, but I definitely think there are more annoying child characters out there. So Dr. Serizawa returns, played by Watanabe, and of course in this film he actually gets to do stuff instead of staring into space with his blank expression in the first film. Whereas in this film you feel like he actually kind of runs Monarch, he's trying to save the day. It's really nice to see him in full go mode, you could say. And of course, the big, sacrifice he makes to wake up Godzilla with the nuke is supposed to be an emotional moment for him, right? He's like basically been a huge Godzilla fanboy this entire series, right? The two films we've seen him in. And so he finally gets to meet his hero, but it's also when he dies. And I know it's supposed to be emotional, it's supposed to be like, oh, the big culmination of these things, but I just felt like didn't really get me that teared up, honestly. I just kind of said, okay. Now, of course, we get to the monster characters. We've got the big G, Godzilla, right? The king of the monsters. Now, Godzilla gets actual screen time in this film, and definitely a lot of it. And he also gets a real motivation. I felt like in the last film, his motivation was just something along the lines of the Mutos are bad, I guess, so he has to stop them. It felt kind of weak. But in this film, there is definitely, not only is King Ghidorah just a threat to the world, but also there's like an actual rivalry for that title of King of the Monsters. So as a natural animal defending its territory, it would confront another entity, right? If the whole planet is Godzilla's territory, then obviously King Ghidorah is a threat to that. There's that natural rivalry between the two. He doesn't stop no matter what to try and defeat his nemesis, only stopping because he's been almost killed by the oxygen destroyer. And finally, after going basically full nuclear, he's able to destroy King Ghidorah and really becomes the full king of the monsters, or really king of the titans. But one thing that kind of bothered me about his character is that they seem to have made him the Superman of these movies. So if we look at what happens, he gets hit with the oxygen destroyer, almost point blank, if you could call it, pretty much hit directly. Survives that, it doesn't kill him, it just puts him into basically a coma. Then he gets hit with a nuke, like to his face, that revives him. Then he goes super meltdown mode, that somehow he survived that and was able to destroy King Ghidorah, and then he was fine. Look, we all know Godzilla is super powerful and super strong, and I don't mind a super strong Godzilla. I don't want a G98 where he gets killed by 6 missiles. But there needs to be some kind of like point where Godzilla can lose or die or something, because otherwise his character just doesn't, he loses that interest. But I really enjoyed his character in this film. I think it was a big step up from the last film. He has a motivation, he has actual screen time, and he has a cool, somewhat of an arc, he fights King Ghidorah, he loses, he gets revived, comes back, and becomes king of the Titans. So in that sense, there's a bit of an arc to him. Now, King Ghidorah, of course, makes I'm gonna just go with his, I apologize if that bothers anyone, but his big Hollywood debut in this film, and he owns every moment of screen time he is on. He becomes the real antagonist of this film, as the eco-terrorists realize that he's the one controlling the Titans now, and he's trying to essentially reform the world into like his own, wherever he came from, because in this film they gave him his extraterrestrial origin, which was really nice. But King Ghidorah owns every moment he's in. He's powerful, he's strong, he can heal, he creates massive storms. I mean, he is a god in this film, really, and unstoppable, and a real threat to the entire world, actually, which was really nice because I felt like the Mutos did not really feel like a threat to the world, whereas King Ghidorah really is a real threat to our world. And so it made him feel like a real nemesis that Godzilla had to stand up against. Of course, Mothra is also introduced in this film, and Mothra actually goes through all her stages. She goes from birth to larva to final moth form. And she has some great parts in the final battle. However, I wish we could have gotten a separate film for her, because I felt like it wasn't right to just shove her origins into this film, and because there's so much you can do with Mothra. And it didn't feel as emotional at the end when she gets destroyed or killed. In other films, if you've known Mothra for a while, you've kind of become attached to her, especially if you're not a fan of Mothra. You don't, for the people who didn't know who Mothra really was, this was their first and only time seeing her. And the question is, what will her death at the end mean? Because she's definitely an important character in this franchise. And there are hints, of course, that they found more Mothra eggs. So we'll have to see if she actually, or he, or another Mothra will make an appearance in Godzilla vs. Kong. Now we come to Rodan, probably the most rogue anti-hero of the monsters introduced in this film. And of course, Rodan is complete havoc. He is just pure chaos. He just attacks whoever pretty much attacks him, unless of course they overpower him, and then he swears his allegiance to them. The first sequence with Rodan is visually amazing, right? This whole battle scene with the jets, and just his devastation of that town in Mexico where he first escapes from. He owns the screen, up until of course King Ghidorah shows him who's really boss. But Rodan is rogue, he's dangerous, he just does what he wants. But I didn't really like how at the end he ended up confronting Mothra and fighting Mothra. Maybe personally because I'd always dreamed in my head of a remake of the classic battle between Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan versus King Ghidorah. But instead, Mothra and Rodan were busy fighting each other during that sequence, and Rodan almost kills Mothra. So for me, him fighting Mothra almost really made the character unlikable for me. There were also a lot of human characters in this film that kind of helped. There was O'Shea Jackson's character, who played like a young soldier, and he had some pretty funny lines, and he wasn't annoying or anything, so I enjoyed his presence. Plus, I believe he lived at the end, which was really nice. There was that scientist dude with the glasses, and I really liked the witty stuff he had to say. And I thought he was going to be annoying, kind of like that one guy in Jurassic World, but he actually turned out to be a pretty funny, interesting character. He was kind of the monster nerd, if you will. And of course, there was also Dr. Chen, who had some cool moments. I think in general, the other human characters weren't awful. I mean, they weren't the most interesting, but they didn't ruin anything for me. Now, a big Hollywood film like this with 4 or more monsters in it requires a lot of visuals. And of course, CGI and visual effects were a large part of this film. There are definitely some moments that look fantastic, I'm gonna say. The battle in Antarctica between Godzilla and King Ghidorah, their first bout, was awesome. Just seeing the snow and this amazing shot of King Ghidorah and Godzilla through the snow for the first time, and Godzilla coming out of the ice. I mean, it's just great visually, and I really enjoyed it. But I definitely feel like there were some weak points. Going to Rodan, I don't know, there were some moments where I think he just didn't look that great. I think the scale and textures they gave him, some of his appearance just looked kind of wonky to me. Also, King Ghidorah's lightning storm after a while just became almost too much. I felt like they should have pulled it back a bit. They were overdoing it, I think. Like, okay, it was just nothing but lightning and storm and clouds. It just took too much of the screen. And just some of the other visual effects, I feel like in general, they were working on a limited budget. Because for all the monsters and all the battles and all the stuff that happens in this movie, they definitely required a bigger budget. As for the music, obviously key to this film's success or not, Bear McCreary delivers a score that manages to use some of Ifuku's classic themes to great success. Now, funny enough, the most memorable scores really involve Godzilla's main theme. They also use Mothra's main theme. But the music is still intense, loud, fast. Rodan's theme is pretty crazy. So Bear McCreary really pulled off the score here. And it really feels apocalyptic, it feels crazy, it feels powerful. No complaints there. And it is wonderful to hear the main Godzilla theme on screen again and just hear it in a movie theater. And it just displays the timelessness of Ifukube's score, of Ifukube's music. That 50 years later, it's still just as powerful. My one negative note, and this is really nothing to do with Bear McCreary, but I didn't really like the cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla that they played during the credits. I wish they had just played the original or the Racer X version. There's another remix version from... I would have preferred any of those instead of the version they played during the credits because I didn't really like it. Apologies to anyone who liked it, but that's just a personal note. This film is loud, it's massive, and it's fun. And if you're a huge Godzilla fan or just a giant monster fan, you'll probably love this film. It has tons of giant monsters and has probably the most famous monsters from Toho's library, except for basically Mechagodzilla. It's not perfect. The plot is pretty weak. The characters just aren't groundbreaking, and there are massive plot holes. But like I said, if you're a kaiju fan, if you're a Godzilla fan, monster fan, or if you're just looking for a fun summer movie, this film is perfect for you. Now, for the future, of course, we have to look towards Godzilla vs. Kong. The box office for King of the Monsters wasn't spectacular, and it probably was below the expectations that Legendary and Warner Brothers had. Now, it's made money, and I don't think it's a box office bomb, but it's just below expectations, which these days is everything when it comes to decisions on what projects get greenlit. So now it's up to really Godzilla vs. Kong to prove if the Monsterverse is really a project that's worth continuing for Legendary. I would say this is very similar to what happened with DC and Warner Brothers with the DC cinematic universe, you know, this lack of success with Dawn of Justice and Justice League being a box office bomb kind of forced DC to reevaluate and redirect things. However, Aquaman was a massive success. Shazam did very well as well. Wonder Woman is still considered like one of the best films. So DC didn't cancel their cinematic universe, they just restructured it and changed the development of their projects. So there's definitely a chance that if that happens with the Monsterverse, maybe it would be put on hiatus, or maybe it would take a break, or they would redirect and readjust the direction of the films. You know, we'll have to see how Godzilla vs. Kong does and hope that that generates enough success that the Monsterverse will be something Legendary will continue to push forward. I do think at this point they've invested so much time and money into these films that they wouldn't just stop after Godzilla vs. Kong, but we have to see. As always, Hollywood is unpredictable, and we could just hope that they continue the Monsterverse. Look out for something for Godzilla vs. Kong at this month's Comic-Con. That'll definitely be something to look forward to and to see where the Monsterverse will continue. And maybe, who knows, maybe other projects to be announced. That's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more content like this, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. As well, if you want to continue to support this channel, go below to my Patreon link and support me there. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!